Hey everybody. So I've talked about this software a lot lately, and I realized I haven't shown really how it works. So this is Wrap 3D. I'm gonna leave a link in the description for you to get it. I'm not sponsored. I paid for this with my own money. Highly recommend it because I think it works like magic whenever you want to get some geometry wrapped around a high sculpt. In this case, I'm just trying to get the metahuman geometry on this character. And I'm just gonna show you how it works. So let's start it. Now you're going to need first two nodes that say load geometry. And I renamed this, so you can right click and rename. And you can rename it to whatever you want. You don't have to use this nomenclature, but you're gonna need two load geometry nodes. One is going to be for your base geometry, and the other one's going to be for your sculpt, your scan, whatever you are using here that you want to wrap that base geometry to. Then the other important node is this one right here. It's called select point pairs. What does this do? You go to the visual editor. The way you navigate here is like any other 3D software. Just hold Alt. I think it's the Maya workflow. It works like Maya. So here you have the 3D viewport. You have the 2D viewport for the textures, and you have the visual editor. The visual editor is usually where you get the nodes that do stuff, kind of like the selection point pairs, select polygons, the wrapping nodes, the brush nodes, which I always have. So let's talk about the selection point pair. So if you click on this node, you're going to see that there's a bunch of numbers on this guy that are not well placed on this character. Reason for that is because this is a template that I always use, and the numbers are already placed on places where I always put the numbers. What do these numbers do? These numbers tell the program where to put things. So let me just get rid of everything. And while I do it, you understand things a little bit better. Make sure this sync views is checked, so whenever you move your character, both characters move along. Now you can place as many points as you want. In my experience, there are certain points that you must do, and there are others that you may choose or not to do, depending on how much fidelity you want that geometry to have regarding your scan. So in this case, I'm just going to put one here. Like this, and I'm going to mimic the same here. So if you see what I'm doing, you understand kind of what this is for. It's just telling the program, hey, this is the places where you're going to grab this geometry and wrap it around the other character. There is a symmetry to this. So you, like over here, you can see there's symmetry. So you don't have to do it twice. However, because the shapes are different, sometimes the placement is not great. So I try not to use symmetry when I'm doing the point pairs. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I just went with it doesn't work. So I just keep doing it by hand. Now for the ears, you're going to see that I place a lot less points than I do for the eyes. Reason being is that, well, you're going to see when I get to the brush. So that is the point pair. So you can see all the points are kind of similar in the same position that I want, telling the program, hey, try to use this as guides for your wrapping. Also, make sure that no points are placed in places where you don't want them, because otherwise the wrapping is going to go haywire. Now, the other node that you're going to need is select polygon. By the way, you can just right click and type the name here, and it will find the node for you. So select polygons. With this node, what you're going to do is select the parts of your base mesh that you don't want them to wrap. So I don't want the mouth back to move, and I don't want the eye sockets to move. So since this has polygroups, we're going to go to polygroups and go look for eye sockets. And as you can see, we have the mouth back selected and we have the eye socket selected, and we're done with that. Now, there is 2 ways of doing the wrapping. There are actually 2 nodes for that. One is the wrap node. You can see that there's wrapping, there's fast wrapping, there's blend wrapping. I have no idea what that is. I've never used it. And then there's cartoon wrapping. The fast wrapping, I've never gotten good results with this. I used to use the wrapping a lot. However, when you start using meshes that are significantly different than your base mesh, like this guy, it's considerably more muscular than the base mesh, and it's a little bit taller. Sometimes this doesn't work as well. So if you use a cartoon wrapping, it kind of like stretches the geometry a little bit further. And if you're doing specially stylized stuff, it works pretty well. So I just stick with the cartoon wrapping as my default, and we'll hit compute. These parameters that I have here are the ones that come default with the cartoon wrapping. I haven't changed any of these. So just hit compute. This is going to take a little bit. I'm going to stop the video here and I'll come back once it's done. All right, so it's done. And as you can see, it's done a wonderful job. There are certain areas that I'm not happy with. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it also shows you the numbers where everything is placed. But you can see how fantastic the wrapping was. You can see the difference between the base over here and the other one. And the difference is staggering when it comes to like muscularity and where everything is placed. But it did a fantastic job. And another thing that I'd recommend, if you're going to do this, do it over a high poly mesh, because I know sometimes you want to wrap around something that you are working on. And if it's not high enough, it's going to have some jagged edges. So make sure it's a really high poly mesh so you don't have any problems, especially if you're using kind of like the geometries that I use, like the metahuman geometry. It tends to be a little bit dense. So if your base is not dense enough, it's going to look jagged. Now that can be fixed, but it's a little bit more work. Now, why do I have this brush node here if everything is done? You can actually call it done with this and just right click here and save output geometry. That's how you export geometry out of this. However, like I mentioned, there are some little areas that I'm seeing that I want to modify. So I usually go into brush and let me reset any changes that have been done to brush. And here in brush, what I do is you got the selection of brushes. The only brushes that I use are this one, clone, that has the 2 spheres, the relax surface, the clone project. Those are the only ones that I use. The relax surface is self-explanatory. It relaxes the surface. The clone project, it moves the new mesh to be more like your scan mesh. Let's call it that. And the clone project is the other way around. So this will move my mesh to be more like the base. However, when you do this, it tries to average between both. So it will never like fully get away from the scanned mesh and go towards the base. It kind of like, yeah, it's an average. Let's call it that. It's an average. But I tend to use this with care, just in parts where I want to keep that silhouette, that shape from the skin. All right, so let's start with a little bit of clone project. Gonna go here with the ear, and you can see that it kind of changed a little bit, but it's changing more towards the ear of the base, which again, that's one of the reasons why I don't place as much points in the ear, because I think the base ear looks fine. I don't need it to mimic the ear from the scan, unless you're doing specific type of ear, like an elvish ear or a goblin or something like that. Now, the other place where I rather have the base a little bit is the eyes, and let's go here. I think I'm going to use symmetry for this. Sometimes I use symmetry for this part. and see how it fixes this part. Again, since this is a sculpt that I'm going to be working on, I'm going to be working on this geometry in ZBrush. I don't mind changing the eyes a little bit because I think I'm going to change them in the end. I think I'm going to change a little bit of the facial features once I get to ZBrush. Over here, I think things are fine. So instead, I'm going to go with relax a little bit because I don't want that to change. This is one of those places where if you do clone project, it kind of gets away from your mesh and starts mimicking the metahuman or whatever base mesh you are using in that case. So again, I'm just going to go with relaxed surface just so things aren't pinched. And so like here where you see that this polygon's going weird to one side, let me get rid of symmetry. We just use the relaxed surface. You can make the brush bigger. I'm using the brackets key to increase the size and reduce the size. So yeah, there you go. All right, as you can see, there are some little issues over here that I don't think I can correct with the brush. So I may have to rewrap again. That took like 2 minutes, so it's not a big deal. But I just want to show you that this could be one of the reasons why you want to add extra points, especially here in the hands. As you can see, the geometry didn't recognize that there was a little gap here and it just ignored it. While it doesn't look as bad, it may give me some troubles when I'm sculpting. So I'm going to go back to my selection point pairs and I'm going to add some points in there. So let's do it like here. There you go. So I'm going to wrap again. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. It wrapped. And as you can see, it did a much better job around the hands. Actually did a better job around the fingers too. So if we go to brush, yep, you can see that everything looks pretty good. I am going to clean this up with a little bit Chrome project. Same thing here. And I may have to go to the other hand, but you can now see that the gap that was there before, it's not. So that is the important part of how you figure out where to place your points. Okay, I'm happy with what we have. So all you have to do is accept here. And if you want, you can save this as a template. I already have it saved. So what I'm going to do is right click, save output geometry. So what this does is it opens Explorer windows for you. You choose wherever you want to save it. This is here by default, include transport, save normals. I just leave it at that. It's always going to save as OBJ. I don't think this saves as FBX. If you know how to save as an FBX with this, let me know. But using as an OBJ is fine. That you can take into Blender for sculpting or take into ZBrush. So I'm going to say hit save. And that is it for this video. That is how you use Wrap 3D. If you have used this program, does it work for you? Let me know what you think about this program. Are you going to get it? Remember to subscribe, leave a like, and leave a comment because it helps out the channel. Now that we're back making tutorials, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.